This is March 22nd, 2025, excuse me. And we are PCR Coast Division, and this is our bi-weekly Zoom meeting. I want to just remind everybody, Phil is off playing with trains someplace, and I don't know exactly where that is. So he's asked me to just host the meeting. Our speaker today is Dennis Brennan. And as Phil has mentioned in the newsletter in the past, Dennis is, I will call you, a professional photographer, and we are interested mostly in the fact that he specializes in model railroad photography. As a background, he got a degree in photography and filmmaking from Rutgers, and he's worked in various types of commercial activities, things like TV commercials, etc., industrial films. And then he turned around and retired and started Brennan's Model Railroading, which is specializes in, or at least part of its specialty, is in model railroad photography. And our most interesting part here is that he's had over 20 covers for classic toy trains. His photography has appeared in Model Railroader, Trains Illustrated, O-Gauge Railroading. At home, Dennis, I guess I would say, models O-scale, 3-rail, but as you'll see from the photos, it doesn't look anything like the Lionel stuff that I have upstairs. So without further ado, Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you have questions, I guess raise your hand or try to put it in the chat. I don't actually know how to get to the chat, but if I can, I will. Dennis, take it away.
Well, hi, guys. I'm glad to be here. We're going to talk about the art behind the science of photography. Now, I'm sure, I don't know what your backgrounds are in photography, but I came up shooting film. All right. When I started shooting black and white, when I was in college, that's when I actually learned how to do black and white processing and developing. I'd already been shooting since 8th grade. I picked up a camera and loved it. And so in college, that was just kind of a natural. And then in commercial photography, had my own commercial photography studio, and you're working with advertising agencies. And at the time, there's no digital cameras at all. This is all film, and it was all slides. That's what you do in commercial photography. And I really learned you had to really know how to meter a scene and how to light a scene. And so that's where all of this comes from. So anyway, with that said, let me get started, and I'm assuming you can see my title slide right now. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. Here's the first photo. Now, this is a photo that I want you to just take a look at it. And
I can't see the PowerPoint. Can everybody else see it?
nobody can see it?
Yep.
Can't see it.
Yeah, I can see it just fine.
Yeah. But we can't. That's funny.
Can anybody else see it?
Yeah, I had to click
on his screen in order to change from his view of his own camera at him to the presentation.
Look on his screen. Okay.
Yeah, no problem seeing it at all. But I set it up so that the speaker
I
is the
I had seen it when you were doing the warm up, but now all I see is you're sharing your
Yeah,
PowerPoint?
I am sharing. Yes. It's
Very
a
strange.
PowerPoint and I'm sharing it.
Okay.
Who isn't seeing it right now? Everybody else is.
That's
Okay.
weird.
Well, then it's got to be something on your end.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Um, all right. I'm sorry too. At any rate, I want you to look at this photo and what is it? I want you to think about what is it that makes this photo appealing? I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to give you a few minutes just to look out and really look at it. And then we'll talk about it. Okay. Now, the photo, it looks real, does it not? It's the kind of photograph that there's something about it that really makes you, that pulls you into the shot. Now, this was originally designed as a cover shot for Classic Toy Trains magazine. So it was cropped vertically. Okay. So with that in mind, I had to compose the shot so that it could be worked that way. But that the photo in and of itself works. Now, what's going on in there? There's so many little details but it's really not that detailed. It looks like there's a lot of detail, but there really isn't. But let's start in the foreground. The snow looks real. Why is that? Well, I didn't blanket the whole thing with a mound of snow like you see in a lot of model railroad photography. I wanted you to be able to see what's going on underneath, and that snow looks like the kind of light snowfall you get when it first starts snowing and it's kind of breezy and it blows the snow. That's what it looks like. And so now you look at it and you see the shot is actually pretty monochromatic if you think about it. The only colors in there's a little bit of red on the truck. There's a red on the boxcar in the building. And then there's a little bit of orange behind the engine and a little yellow on those boxcars. Now, none of this is by accident. This is all purposely done. That boxcar is positioned just so. It's not hidden behind the telephone pole. It would have been, if I had moved that boxcar just a little bit so that it lined up with the telephone pole, you would have lost it. So what is the boxcar doing behind the engine? What is that actually doing? And what is the other one doing? It's creating planes. It's creating depth. This picture really has a foreground, which is the snow, a middle ground, which is the engine, really, and the oblong box company that the boxcar is in. And then you have boxcars behind the engine. And what do? Well, they set off the engine. They create another plane. And the color was purposely picked so that the black would stand out, would pop at you. So what you've got here is layers of depth. And you hear a lot about depth of field, but this is even different. It's not just depth of field. Yes, I have complete depth of field from that tree in the very foreground all the way to that building with the in the background. It's completely sharp. But what you got to think about is you have to create depth, and it's not just a matter of a mechanical thing with your camera. It has to do with the way you set up a scene. And so you have to think about creating layers in your scene. So anyway, that's what's going on with that picture. There's a lot we could talk about, and I could keep going on, but there's others. Okay, now here's another shot. Now, the other thing that you need to think about is, where do you put your camera? Camera position is critical if you want to make your photos look real. Now, that's the difference between a shot of a layout that's just a documentary shot. Oh, hey, look at this. This is my layout. Or a shot that takes on its own personality, a shot that creates an image that looks real, looks like a scene that you could see anywhere. Now, how do you do that? Well, think about this image too. That engine, what do we have going on? We've got these rocks in the foreground, and that that's a little trick that you guys might think about if you haven't already done it. That's right on the edge of my layout, or at least this layout. It's right on the edge. I purposely lowered that edge so that when I put a camera, when I shoot, I have something that gives me some foreground, and still the train is elevated. Now, you don't have to do that all around your layout, but if you have a flat, why not bring the edge of your layout down a little bit, so that you don't have to shoot right at the top of the tabletop. At any rate, that's something to think about. Now, in this case, I purposely let those background buildings get a little bit soft. Why? Because we're looking over a distance, presumably. Actually, the distance between those background buildings and that foreground is very shallow. You're talking maybe 6 feet. But it looks further than that. And part of the reason for that too is those are HO scale buildings in the background. You may recognize them. Those are Walther's kits that I kit bashed. All right. Now, here is that same scene. What's different about it? It's a whole different time. Now we have snow and the lighting. Look at the lighting in that. That represents that bascule bridge is going over a harbor. And what do you see in the morning, in the wintertime, possibly?
Fog.
Yeah, fog. And I used a fog machine for this. And the lighting is very subtle, because you couldn't overpower the engine. And that's the other thing you need to think about in all of your shots, lighting. And that's another thing we'll talk about. Now, the lighting for this was pretty simple, actually. Now, I use studio lights, but you could do this with a light and a reflector. But what I did is I had just a little bit of light on the background behind the buildings. And the background behind the buildings is nothing more than a large white sheet of photo backdrop paper. And I just put a little bit of light in there, and I let the buildings go in silhouette. And the only light that's coming is just a little bit of light that lights up the bridge and the engine. and it looks real. Now the car behind the engine, and where's the color in this? This is a mono. The color is a little pop of color in the switch stand and the nice yellow hopper car behind the engine. And it's not too bright. And it just gives you enough separation between the engine and the bridge in the background.
Motion at your Ring video doorbell.
Okay, here's another shot. Now, this shot was based on a real life shot that I saw in a book called New York Harbor Railroads. And I used that book a lot in trying to duplicate the feel of this particular layout, which is the Sandy Harbor Terminal Railroad. There was a shot in the book that used a tank engine just like this, and the scene was very similar, looking past crossing gates, down a road with a strong shadow coming in from one side. Now, this isn't an exact duplicate of that shot, but the feeling is there. Now, what makes this shot work? Well, for most part, it's very monochromatic, except that there are some pops of color in there, like the boxcar, like the little fire hydrant in front of the cafe and the little cafe curtains. And that's about it. I mean, of course, the rest of it is the buildings are pretty much earth tone. Now, none of this is an accident. The whole layout was designed with a palette of colors. So I guess the point that I'm getting at is it's not just the photography. You can have the best camera in the world, and you can take a perfectly composed picture, but if you don't have the modeling, you don't have it. And if you don't have and lighting, now none of this lighting is difficult, but you think about where the sun is. Look at this and think about where the sun is. Can anybody tell me where the sun is in this shot?
Upper right.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So in the model railroad photography books in the past, and even in model railroader now, if you go and look, I'm not sure what it was, but in the past, they always used to tell you no shadows. Don't have shadows, do even lighting. Put one light on the right and one light on the left and try to, make it all even. Well, that doesn't look real. That doesn't look real at all. Think about the time of day that you want to portray and do your lighting accordingly. Now, in a lot of cases, what I have is I did have a strong light coming from the upper right, but in addition to that, I probably, I can't remember because this is a while that I did this, but I might have had another light that was almost frontal, that and it was probably just a soft light. A lot of times I'll use a white bounce card, just a big white card, and let the key light, which is the sunlight, that's a key light, let that bounce off the card and fill in. You don't want to obliterate the shadows, but you want to fill them in. When you think about it outside, you've got a lot of skylight. When you have direct sunlight, you've also got skylight that bounces around and fills in the shadows. So that's something that you can think about. You don't want to create a two shadows if you can, if you don't have to. All right, let's look at another one. Now here's that same scene, except that I shot it a little bit differently. And now we're looking at, I see it as very early morning on the way to work. Maybe, and it's wintertime again. And maybe we're talking about 5:30, 6 o'clock, something like that. Now, what makes this shot work? Well, again, look at the snow. Look at the tracks in the snow. That's a very minor detail, but that adds so much life to the scene. That car is definitely going somewhere. And the lighting on this was very controlled, although it looks perfectly natural. What I did is you can see the little lights coming out, the light that's going across the sidewalk and into the street from the cafe. That's what I balanced everything else to. I wanted that light to show up. And so that's not just, there is additional lighting in this, but you can't tell. It feels like that's where all the light's coming from the buildings and the little street lights there. And you'll also notice that the light in the store front is brighter than the lights upstairs. Now, upstairs I see it as an apartment. And so what you're looking at is I put some wallpaper back there, which is nothing more than some crafting paper. That in craft departments, they have stuff that looks like wallpaper. And I use something you can't really see. There's a little bit of a design on it. And I put shades in the window. And you don't see any light in there. That light you see in there is out of view purposely. Now, look at the light, the color of the light. Look at the color of the light in the building behind it, the industrial building. That's a much cooler light. That's no accident either. So, all right, here's another shot. Now, what's going on here is, again, we have forced perspective. The buildings in the upper level are all HO scale. The buildings on the lower level are O scale. And again, we have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Now, the sky in this shot, that's again white paper, white backdrop paper that I lit with blue gels on the light. And you'll also notice that it's not perfectly even. And that's not an accident either. The sun is also coming from the upper left this time, and the sky is a little bit brighter over there. And again, just like in the previous shot, I'm going to go back to that again. There's not a lot of detail. You got a fire plug, you got street lights. What else you got besides the buildings? But you would think there's a ton of detail in this stuff. And here again, too, it's not tons of, it's the way the shot is composed. There's little details like the guy with the head, the boy on his shoulders. And this sets a scene. What's going on here? Well, there's a pickup truck. Presumably that's the guy's pickup truck, and he brought his kid down here to watch the trains on their, this is a place, it's a dead end street. And we have the little At one point, that road probably went through, but it got blocked off. That's how I saw it. Again, here's another photograph that is different than the others you've seen. And what makes this work? It's the reflections. Water is all about reflections, gentlemen. If you don't have reflections, you don't have water. Now, how do you get reflections like that? Is that a camera trick? No. Well, part of it is in the photography. You have to think about the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflectance. So if you, and what that means is you have to position your camera in the right spot. So if you want to see the reflection, you have to get up and look down at it. And what's it going to reflect is what's behind it. And water is not blue. I see so many places where, and professional model makers have done this too. They make their water blue. Water is not blue. If you took a glass of that water out of the stream that you're shooting, it would not be blue. So why do they make water blue? Well, because a lot of times you get sky reflected in it. But that causes you a problem, because if you've gone to an amusement park where there's water rides and they paint the base of the water ride blue, it looks artificial, because it is. And when you do that on a train layout, it doesn't look right. So what did I do here? Believe it or not, this is shower door glass. And what I did is I painted the underside of it, or the back side of it, with Krylon camouflage khaki paint. Now, why did I do that? That's kind of a murky green color. Well, like I said, I used New York Harbor Railroad books for reference. And being from the East Coast, I'm familiar with the New York Harbor area. And if you look at the harbor across, it looks murky green. If you look down into it, you see reflections. Remember, angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. Now, this is a perfectly still photo, but look at it. Doesn't it look like the water is moving? I didn't do that. The glass does that. And it looks different in the shadow than it does if you look at it at the shadow under the girder bridge. That looks like the water is still. And then outside, it looks like there's ripples in the water. Well, that has to do with the way the glass is, and also the position of your camera to get those reflections like that. And in order for that to show up, you also have to have a background that reflects into the water. So camera angle is critical when you're trying to get reflections in water. Again, you've got a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, and everything is sharp. And the colors, again, the yellow hopper car is no accident. Here's one of my favorite shots as well, called Denny Loves Sandy. Sandy is my wife. And I created this scene with her thought in it. Now, what's special about this photo? There's no hero in this shot. I mean, it looks like A photographer came along and just happened to be in the right place at the right time and grabbed his camera, picked it up, and bam, that's what you got. It's got a snapshot quality to it, but this was not an accident, obviously. It's very well staged. I purposely didn't make a hero out of anything. When you start looking at this photo, I think one of the first things you see is probably the engine, and then you go and look at the bus, and then your eye goes around and looks at the houses that are stair stepping up a hillside. And again, there's not tons of detail, but there's enough detail. There's a sewer grate right by the bottom of the bus there. There's what I call street schmutz, that kind of gravelly, gritty, grayish stuff that you find around corners and along curbs and going into driveways, and where this road goes into a kind of a gravel road. And then the street is not all one color, and it looks like it's been patched. And there's the little exhaust color coming up the back of the bus. None of that is an accident, gentlemen. It's all carefully staged, all carefully thought about. Now, if you want to make your photos look real, you need to think about a lot of things. Lighting is key, which is what I've been saying. My light always comes from a direction. Now, unless it's an overcast day, then it's a very soft photo like you saw. But if you want to really learn about photography, go out and shoot pictures. And I don't mean just shoot your layout pictures. Go outside, go to an industrial area, go to a railroad, shoot some pictures. Shoot a ton of pictures, and then scrupulously go through them and see what you like and what you don't like. And when you figure out, when you see something that really works for you, figure out what it is that's working. Another way to get good at model railroad photography is look at the various coffee table books that they have on railroads. New York Central, Sandy Harbor, or New York Harbor railroads. I mean, any railroad that you model, there's somebody who put a book out, and somebody who has a book that captures the time period that you're looking at. Look at those photos. What makes those photos work? Are they all beautiful art pieces? No. But they still are composed well, and they still will work. And so think about that. And what makes them work is they're natural. And what makes model photography work and not look like model photography is your depth of field, which is critical. But that doesn't mean that you have to have everything from the foreground to the background perfectly sharp. That's the goal. But where you have to make a decision, let the background go soft. Keep your detail in the foreground, your sharpness in the foreground. And that's the other thing about detail. Put your detail on your layout in the foreground where people can see it. If they can see it in the foreground, they assume that that same level of detail exists on your entire layout, or in the entire photograph, or in the entire scene. Okay, here's another shot. This shot is great for the composition of it. I mean, look at how the engine is framed underneath that gantry crane. I mean, your eye goes in the dock. Now, see, that's the other thing you need to think about. Leading lines. Your eye is led right into that engine. Why? Well, because of the angle of the shot and the loading dock. Just think about that. And we have something going on here. What's going on? Well, we got one guy who apparently is kind of just supervising, standing on the dock, while the other guy is trying to hook up the chain to or remove the chain from that object. We don't know whether that object is being loaded into the truck or unloaded from the truck, but it doesn't matter. And again, there's just little details, but not tons of details. And here's another shot from the Sandy Harbor, a different view. There's that Sandy loves Denny. But this is a whole different view. And that's the other point. You need to think about where you put your camera. Now, in this case, I am assuming that I was standing on the other side of that bridge, almost at the same level as that engine, except that I zoomed in with my camera. Now, this is the photographer's point of view, if it was real life. And I took that shot and made it a vertical. Your shots do not all have to be horizontal. But when they are vertical, there should be a reason for it to be vertical. And again, we have detail, but it's minor detail. But it looks more detailed. And there's the posts in the yard. Presumably, they would have clothes on them. That's like a clothesline pole. But we don't see a clothesline. Well, either it didn't show up in the photo or else they're not using it anymore. And here's another shot. If you think about framing your shots. Now, this is a shot that I took on another gentleman's layout. And again, the sky was created with white backdrop paper that I shined blue light on. Actually, I used blue gels over the light and shined it up on that. Now, your eye is immediately drawn into that engine. Why? Well, because you have leading lines. Everything leads you right in there, and it's perfectly framed between the bridge pillar, the top of the bridge, and the barn. And that truck, the only critique that I have about it is I wish I had that truck a little bit further away and pointing around the curve. That's the only thing I'd change about that shot. That doesn't mean the shot is bad. It's just that I think it would have been better had I done that. Now here's an overall shot of the Sandy Harbor Railroad, which was a railroad. Actually, it's a small layout that I created as a how-to project that was featured in 4 different issues of Classic Toy Trains magazine. And talking about a realistic point of view, again, I imagined myself on the 2nd or 3rd floor of a typical 3-family house, like you see in those pictures where the houses are going stair-stepping up. Now, again, there's a lot going on here. And the train is just a minor character. This feels like, I wanted it to feel like just a day in the life. I went out on the porch, or it's probably a porch, to take a picture because the train was coming by and I grabbed the shot, and this is what you see. Again, all those buildings on the upper level are HO scale, and yet it works. And the distance here, from this particular point to those backgrounds is probably 6 feet, maybe 7 feet. And you'll notice that I have a street going down underneath the bridge, which you saw a picture from the other side. And this is the buses coming up the hill. A lot of people don't do that. What I did with this layout is I built it up on 2 layers of 2-inch foam. The harbor is down on top of, I removed the 2 inches of foam on top for the harbor. And then I put the tracks at that level of 4 inches, you know, on the second level of the foam, or actually on the first level of the foam, and then I built up from there too. So the track is actually in the center of the layout, not at the base of the layout and building up. If you put the track in the middle and build up and down, you've got a lot more flexibility. And that's also what helps in photography. So, you know, the photography, I could have the best camera in the world, like I said before, but if I don't have the subject matter and the modeling, it doesn't matter how great the photography is. Okay, here is a perfect exercise in controlling your depth of field. Now, also, this is a forced perspective thing, believe it or not. The foreground cart on the right there is bigger than 1/48 scale. I don't remember what scale it is, but it's bigger than 1/48. And again, this was a gentleman's 3-rail layout. He was also a high railer like myself. His modeling was excellent. He built that car. And the building in the very background, that's an HO scale building. But what makes this work, I couldn't get depth of field from the foreground all the way to the background. So what did I do? I made sure that the foreground and the middle ground were sharp, and I let the background fall into soft focus. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's acceptable. You will accept that in the scene. However, if those weeds had been out of focus, I mean, really out of focus, and or that cart had been out of focus, it says model railroad photography. Because in real life, you think about it, you take a camera outside, mostly everything is sharp. Why? Because you're not doing close-up photography. Okay, now here, this is a great shot proving that you can shoot with a long lens and still have everything in focus. There's a big misunderstanding about telephoto shots and versus wide angle shots. Big misunderstanding. Here, this proves a point. Just because you're using a telephoto lens doesn't mean that you're going to have soft focus or no depth of field. And that all has to do, it all has to do with your understanding. Just because it's a wide angle lens, what that allows you to do, let me put it this way. A wide angle lens allows you to be closer and with a wider field of view. Okay, you can get a wider field of view. So you don't have to get back very far. You got a wider field of view, and it's when you do that, and you're using f/22, a lot of stuff is going to be sharp. Now, you could take that same scene, and if I shot this with a wide angle lens, for instance, as long as I included the same amount, if I frame the shot exactly the same way with a wide angle lens, that just means that I have to move in closer. Now, it's going to be a slightly different perspective, of course, but you have to move in closer. Well, what that tells you then is if you want to take the same scene with a telephoto lens, then move back. The farther back you are, creating the same scene that you have in your wide angle lens, you're going to have the same depth of field. Assuming you're using f/22. So the idea that you have to use a close-up lens or a wide angle lens to get a good shot is ridiculous. It's all a matter of controlling your depth of field and camera placement. Now, here's a little trick that you're not going to see in any photography book. Now, this is a DX. This is a 2/3 camera. A lot of those photos that you saw, the later photos, not the latest ones that I've done, but a lot of them were shot with a Nikon DX camera, which is not a full frame camera. And for this particular thing, what I was trying to show is you see a little window in there. This is a shot of your lens, and that's the little window. And your focus point is at 0.8 or meters, or somewhere between 3 feet, a little less than 3 feet. However, if you're shooting with a DX camera or even a full frame camera, here's what you do. Focus on the nearest thing that you need to have sharp. And that the nearest thing in the foreground. Now, if there's something in the foreground that's annoying, take it out. But the nearest thing that you need sharp, and note the footage reading. Say in this case, it was 1.5 feet. Then change your focus to focus on the farthest thing. In this case, it was 5 feet. So what did I do? I put it in between. Now, if you don't have enough depth of field, then you do one of two things. If there's an object in the foreground that is causing you a problem and not really necessary to the photo, either take it out like a telephone pole if it's not sharp, or change your angle, change your shot. And if you have to cheat, then you can go more towards, if you move the 1.5 feet towards that focus mark, you're going to shift your depth of field. You're going to shift it more towards the foreground. If you move the 5-foot mark towards that focus mark, then you're going to shift your depth of field more towards the background. So the point is, if you have to make a decision, either remove an offending object in the foreground, or change your focus, or shoot something like if there's a street there, which is pretty smooth, and that's the foreground, well, that doesn't need to be cracked sharp because there's really no detail in it. So you can get away with that. But if you have to make a decision, then either change your shot or let the background go out of focus and key on the foreground. And as long as you have those numbers within that window, that's your depth of field. And if you don't believe me, try that. Now, this is using, I'm assuming now that everybody is a professional photographer and you're using a 35 millimeter camera, but you're not. So if you're using a cell phone, you really not going to be able to control that like this. But if you are using a cell phone to take a picture, there is something called Pro Photo in your settings. If you use Pro Photo, you can control the shutter speed and you can control the f-stop. So that will give you some flexibility. And but if you're trying to do photos for the internet, that's fine. But if you're doing magazine photography, I highly recommend you use a professional camera. Doesn't have to be a Nikon, but use a 35 millimeter, either digital or mirrorless. That's my suggestion. Now, again, I grew up with 35 millimeters, so I'm not going to use cell phones to take pictures. Could I take pictures with a cell phone? Absolutely, but I'm not going to do it. Why would I? Okay, and now here's another shot that I did for advertising the coal that I sell. Again, this was set up on the Sandy Harbor layout, although that scene doesn't exist there. What I did is I set this up on a little table before the layout, in front of the layout, and let the buildings become the background. And you'll notice that I purposely let those buildings go out of focus. But it looks perfectly natural. And why did I do that? Well, because what's critical is what's going on here. Now, a little trick is, how did I get the coal to be spilling into the truck? Well, what I did is I took a piece of clear plastic, flexible, like you might use for window material, glazing. And I cut it in sort of kind of a little bit of a wider shape at the bottom, a triangular shape, sort of. And then I spray glued it and sprinkled coal on it. And I got that shot. You also notice that everything looks the way it's supposed to look. And there's a scene. There's actually something going on here. And again, the lighting. Look at the nice little shadow that falls behind the coal loader and in the bin. That's not an accident. That was purposely done. Okay, and here's an advertising shot that I did, and there's a different look on this one. This was shot as a slide. This is before digital cameras came out. This is a slide shot, and it was for advertising my chain link fence kit. I also submitted this photo to Model Railroader when they used to have a model railroad contest. And I came in the contest. I was like second or third place. I don't remember. It wasn't number one, but the judges liked this photo. Why did they like it? Well, it's an ordinary scene. There's no hero in this shot. It looks like the photographer just happened to be in the right place at the right time and caught this shot of, you know, the brakeman or probably the brakeman closing the gate after they just dropped off a car, or else maybe they opened the gate. Doesn't matter. Maybe they're going to pick it up. And there's a pickup truck there who's just about to cross the tracks. Now, again, where's the detail? There's only a few little understated details. The little pallet alongside that building that's going off the frame, and a little oil drum, and a little weedy plant, and part of a telephone pole. That's it. And the background is nondescript. Those, again, are HO buildings in the background at a higher level. If they're up at a higher level, then it works. If you put them on the same level, it's too obvious. But if they're up at a higher level, it creates an illusion. Now, again, for this photograph, that building on the very left does not exist on the layout. I added a little segment to the layout. I screwed a piece of wood, made a little bracket and screwed a piece of wood to the layout and put that building on it just to have a little more depth in the scene. And that's it, gentlemen. Does anybody have any questions?
Wow. Dennis, thank you so much. The first question that I know somebody else has besides me is, what kind of snow did you use?
Baking powder, baking soda.
Baking soda. I knew it.
Yeah, baking soda. And I should tell you about that very first photo. The way the snow formed on that very first photo was a happy accident. Okay. I did want a nice, I was going to have just a nice look, not completely covered, but I didn't have actually that particular look in mind. And what happens is when you do snowfall, you have to use a strainer, obviously. You pour it into a strainer, and typically when you put it into the strainer, you should have your strainer not on your layout, but over a piece of paper or something, because when you first pour it into the strainer, it's going to go poof, and you're going to get a big pile of snow there. Well, I had carefully got everything staged where I wanted, and I wanted to get this done. And so I put the strainer over the street, and I forgot about putting a piece of paper underneath it ahead of time. And I poured the stuff in it and went plop, and I had a big mound of snow right there. And I went, oh crap. Now I've either got to vacuum this up or try to spread it around. And I, you know, it wasn't a giant pile, but it was a mound. And so I thought, well, wait a minute. What if I just blow on it? And I went, and there you go. So, just, it's, you know, it's just one of those things. So if you make a mistake, the idea here, the point I'm trying to make is, instead of looking at it as a mistake, look at it as an opportunity.
So Dennis, I have a question. In terms of lighting, for instance, they make these circular lights that people are using, LED lights
Yes,
for
ring lights.
yeah. So what color setting would you recommend? I mean, because you have warm yellows and whites, and is it everything, or what would be
Good.
better for a wearer?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Because I didn't talk about color temperature. And so I'm going to give you a little more information than you need. color temperature is critical. Now, a lot of you guys probably have a layout in the basement or in another room, and you've got overhead fluorescent lights. Am I correct? Or you
Yes.
might have a combination of fluorescent lights and can lights. Yes?
Yes,
A lot
generally.
of people do that. I mean, in the past, it's been said, well, I like to use those can lights because they give a little more warmth to the scene where the fluorescents are a little bit too blue. And so that kind of evens it out. Well, your eyes are very forgiving, gentlemen. And so, yes, as far as it goes, that's true. However, cameras don't see stuff that way at all. So if you have two different kinds of lighting, and I had a photos, I did and maybe I'll come back sometime and show you. I have two photos that I've done using different lights and using different lights in the same scene. Now, if what happens with the camera is the camera will take, if it's got auto, you have auto exposure and you have auto color correction. If it has a mixture of light like that, it's going to kind of try to put it in the middle. And if it does, it puts your color temperature somewhere in the middle, which means nothing will look right. I mean, something is going to be off. Now, if you try to balance it towards, let's say you've got your typical fluorescent lights, if you're using like shop lights, those are like 4,100 degrees Kelvin. Your typical can lights, if you're using your old simple tungsten can light, those are like 2,800 degrees Kelvin. Okay, there's a big color difference between those two. The fluorescent light is going to be more towards the blue, while the can lights are going to be more towards the yellow.
Mhm.
So when you're talking about color temperature, it's critical. So I don't care what kind of light you have, and I don't care what color temperature you use on that light, as long as it's consistent with all the other colors that are lighting the layout. So,
In the scene, just lighting the scene.
yeah, lighting the scene.
Right.
Exactly. Because uh, that's the critical part. Now, that's not always easy to do. You guys are probably not photographers. You probably don't have the gear. So what I would suggest is try to match your lighting to whatever the lighting is that you got overhead. If you think of your overhead lighting as the skylight, right? And that's also going to be very flat, unless you're using like can lights. But either turn off the fluorescent lights and leave the can lights on, or turn off the can lights and leave the fluorescent lights on. Now, in terms of using your supplemental light, I'm not sure that I would use a ring light, but if that's what you got, it'll probably do. Then
Because I
try,
have like a Vivitar one, and you can adjust it to any color you want to
yes,
do, and it's fairly large, so you can clearly, and it's only $100, and you can light the whole scene quite nicely.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, as long as you can do that, then turn off your other lights, and you might need to use a bounce card, like a white card, to reflect some more light into the shadows. Or else, if you're going to need, depending on the scene. I mean, a scene like this, you could probably not do that with one light like you're talking about. That wouldn't work.
Gotcha.
And so if you're just using the one light, it doesn't matter what the color temperature is. But if you're trying to balance it with other lights, then you need to understand color temperature. And like I said, start looking at, when you buy lighting, look at the bulbs. Now, a lot of these fluorescent lights now are, you can get LEDs that will fit into fluorescent fixtures. So I shoot all tungsten light, which is basically what photographers use. Two different kinds of lights. Professionals, they either use flash strobe lights or they use tungsten lights, which is 3,200 degrees Kelvin. Now, flash is like 6,000 degrees Kelvin. That equates to daylight. And 3,200 degrees Kelvin is pretty much your normal household kind of look. I mean, the old tungsten bulbs were 2,800 degrees, a little bit warmer than the 3,200 degrees that are used for professional lighting instruments. But now a lot of the LED instruments are coming with a range of colors, like you're talking about. So if you're going to do that, then just make sure everything is the same color temperature. That's the key. It doesn't really matter what color temperature you use.
Be consistent.
It's all the same.
Gotcha. So the other question I have is backdrops. In this case, you used a painted backdrop behind the scene.
Okay, in this case, I dropped in a sky backdrop in Photoshop.
Okay.
Did
you use a blue screen as your original backdrop? Or?
No, I had a white background.
Okay.
In Photoshop, it's, it was real easy to just change. They have what they call sky replacement. It's a neat little feature in Photoshop, and you have various skies you can pick, and then you can also zoom in on them or move them around. And so I found I picked a particular sky and I zoomed in on it and I moved it around so that I got it so that it was lighter on the bottom and got a little bit darker towards the top. And had that same kind of grayish overcast feeling. I mean, there's a little blue there, but it's a blue gray.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah. So that's actually the first time I've actually done that. Most of the time on all those other shots, I lit the sky separately.
Are there any other folks that have some questions and things like that? Dennis, this is fabulous. I mean, we're personally, we're learning a lot here.
I hope I didn't go too far astray and confuse anybody with any of this stuff. I tend to, I don't want to talk above anybody's head. So I hope I was clear enough in some of the points I'm trying to make.
So do you have an email address that we could send a photo to you and maybe we get a professional feedback?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's my first name, Dennis, DENNIS, at Brennan'sModelRR.com. And that's right there.
Cool.
Brennan'sModelRR.com. And I am always glad, and you can get on my website too, Brennan's Model Railroading. And that's, that is www.Brennan'sModelRR.com.
I had a shadow question. If you can go to the one with the crossing gate and yeah, I find it pretty compelling that some of the shadows are sharp and some are kind of blurry. Like under the crossing gate arm, it's pretty sharp, but from the building in front of it, it's a bit more blurred. Was that something that you worked at getting?
No, that was a natural occurrence. And it has to do with where the object is in relation to the light. Okay, so I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember exactly what. Yeah, I know what was there. Think about that. I think that shadow was closer to the light, and the other shadows are farther away from it. So the farther away it is, the sharper the shadow is going to be. So look at where the shadow is on the building, the triangular shadow up here. That is that's fairly sharp, and it's farther away. And this shadow is also pretty sharp, but it's this shadow that is lighter, and that's probably because that object is closer to the light source.
I do really love your color palette. I take it you're a big fan of Hopper too, or somebody like that?
Pardon me, about what it was the last part you said?
Oh, I take it you're a big fan of people like Edward Hopper and people
Oh,
like
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I want to create a feeling, and that's yeah, that whole layout was built with a color palette in mind. Um, so yeah. Any other questions?
Well, Dennis, I'll seeing none.
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ray.
yeah, I'm sorry. I started to ask a question, and then, as usual, I forgot to take myself off mute. Dennis, I came in a little late, and so you may have talked about this, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the color, the light temperatures that you talked about, and what is like bright sunlight, overcast, moonlight, and that sort of thing. Because I don't know really anything about lighting temperature.
Okay, I'm not.
Well, I might be using the,
Okay,
no, actually, probably won't.
color temperature,
Try to think of what I want to do.
color temperature is there's a range. And in modern lighting today, it usually goes from warm to cool. And warm being probably like in most of if you look on the back of a light bulb or or especially with LED lights, go into a store and look at what it says on the back of it, and it'll show where the light is in relation to that scale. Warm being about 3,000 degrees and cool being somewhere around 5,000 degrees. Now, sunlight is generally considered to be about 6,000 degrees. Daylight basically is about 6,000 degrees Kelvin. Now, shadow areas can go up higher than that because you got a lot of blue, and the higher the color temperature number, the bluer the light. The lower the number, the warmer or more yellow the light. So when we grew up, everything was lit up with tungsten and fluorescent. Tungsten being your typical household light bulb. That's 2,800 degrees Kelvin. That is just a little bit warmer than the 3,200 degrees that I shoot with. Professional photography uses two light sources, either flash or or 3,200 degree tungsten lights, like studio lights. So in terms of that, whenever you're shooting, make sure that you're using the same type of light at the same color temperature. And that's one of the keys. And if you only want to use one light, then use a bounce card. If the scene is small enough, you can use a bounce card. And if your key light is to the upper right, then just use a bounce card towards the front and on the other side of your subject. And that will fill in the shadow without overpowering it and without creating an additional shadow. So I hope that's kind of help. Does that answer your question?
Well, I now feel like I know a little bit more. Bounce card, that's just something that's white and reflective?
Yes. Yep, it can be. I use foam core. You know what foam core is? It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, I use a piece of foam core all the time. It works perfectly.
Foam core is the greatest invention in the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
we have any other kinds of questions here? Oh, that's great. Dennis, on behalf of PCR Coast Division, I really, really, really want to thank you for the time you spent and just helping us get a better perspective on, taking pictures and seeing what we're looking at and setting up scenes and stuff of that nature. So if there's nothing else, I'll let everybody go. And again, thank you very much.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure, gentlemen. Thanks for joining in. And again, if you have any questions, either give me a call or shoot me an email. And if you want to send a picture I'd love to see your work and your photography. If you want a professional opinion on it, I'll give it to you. But be prepared. I'll be honest. If you want me to soft soap it, I'm not going to do that. I will be honest with you in a nice way. But the whole idea would be to help you take a better picture. And so composition seems to be the biggest problem that a lot of people have. And I didn't talk about it, but real quickly, the rule of thirds is something that you should think about. And if you, rather than me get into it right now, go online and look up the rule of thirds in photography. Google is your friend, gentlemen, and you'll find out some stuff that you need to know. And if you have any other questions, then just ask me. All right?
Okay, cool.
Okay, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, y'all take care now.
All right.
Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
weekend.
All
Thank
right.
you.
You guys too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching this Coast Division eClinic. More Coast eClinics can be found on the Coast Division YouTube channel.